A lot of you have seen me make this jacket out of 1 meter of material. Absolutely beautiful. It's so chic. And I made a pattern, which a lot of you have come along and bought. So thank you for that. You can buy it in the description below. Also shows you how to use narrow fabric. And I've got some narrow fabric today. There you go. It's 110 centimeters wide, which is 43 inches. This is a widely available width of fabric. A lot of you would have dealt with it. And I'm going to show you how to make a jacket just like this out of narrow gauge fabric. Isn't it absolutely beautiful? Look at the reverse. It's a Chinese brocade. I think we've all seen something like this, and I absolutely love it. I wanted an excuse to buy it and use it. Now, what I've got with this, in the pattern you'll see that you can make it from something as small as sort of 1.50 meters, so 1.5 yards. I've got 2 yards, and in the pattern I go through a couple of variations you can do with how to fasten it and how to make it longer. I'm going to show you how to do that with this because I have enough fabric to do so, so you can see how to make it exactly as the pattern with the wide fabric on the video for this one. And you can see how to make it with some of the variations from the pattern, which you can get in the description with this fabric. So let's go and cut it, and I'll show you how I'm going to cut it. It's a really great way, and there's less raw edge management in the way that I cut it, and then we'll get to sewing. So you can see the reason I cut it that way is because we have a selvage, and honestly, quite a lovely selvage for a brocade. And you know, an inexpensive fabric, obviously sometimes they're quite fluffy and they can be bulky. This one is not. It's absolutely gorgeous. It just ends. And on the inside of the jacket, the selvage will be turned back, so it will look like that, which is going to be absolutely wonderful, isn't it? On the seams. So there'll be a center back seam, there'll be a side seam as well. And this will be then, it will sort of flicker if the jacket opens when you're wearing it, and you'll just see that little flash of silver inside on top of this wonderful grey. So that's why I cut it down the selvages like that. It's absolutely game changing, especially if you don't want to do lots of folding over and sewing. So it's really good for that. And anything that doesn't have the selvage on it, you can do with a French seam. So we'll see how to do that as well. But that's why I cut it that way. Let's get to sewing. I've turned the raw edges of the center back from the hem only to the center back neck, and I've done that twice, so you can see here when it's sewn together you have this beautiful seam at the back. I could have also finished this with a French seam, that would have been absolutely fine, and then chosen which way to press it, but I chose to do it that way, and that way I have the continuity throughout the garment. Now we take out the center front, which is 10 centimeters in from the raw edge, and you go all the way down to the shoulder line, and you go 2 inches or 5 centimeters beyond that to get that curve of the back of the neck. And I just use anything round to create a little curve. And you can see there I've put the right sides together, so I've cut them both at the same time, and I end up with a pair. It's more symmetrical that way. It's just a better way to do it than going all the way around. Next thing I need to do is work out how long this center front opening is going to be for the collar to fit. So I turn up the hem just there. I'm not going to sew this. I'm just placing it in place so I can just double check that my collar is the right length. Because you can change the length of this jacket every single time, the collar can be different every single time, and all you need to do is take that measurement and make sure it's accurate. So here I am getting the sash ready. What I do is fold it in half and just double check how wide it will be once it's all sewn, and it's a really rough estimate. What I'm trying to ascertain is how big I want to make the loops for it to pass through. And so this is 9 centimeters. I'll make them a little bit larger than that. So 9 centimeters is just under 4 inches. But you can change this to however wide your sash is. Again, it's a very malleable pattern. It's so easy to adjust and change for your measurements. It's really good in that way. So I do that, and then I just cut from any of this excess fabric that we have. I'm going to use the center front because they're lovely. I know that if I just cut them halfway down the center, I've got 2 inches on either one, which is 5 centimeters. And when you sew and turn that, that turns into a great little loop to hold a sash. As I fix the loops, I'm just going to quickly do the sash. I always try and get the sash done at the first part of the garment. I don't like it to be the last part. I like to do the hem and then have the garment finished. I feel like the hem is the end of the garment. You do the hem at the end, and I don't want to have to sew any other things. So I always do my sash now, and that is as simple as running the stitch all the way around the side, leave a gap in the middle, and then that's so we can pull it all through and turn the sash out, and then we sew that shut. Here is a great tip. Two great little tools that I use. One, if you're turning a sash or a really long thing that has to be turned out or bagged out. If you're bagging something out that's really long, like a sash, grab a meter ruler and put it on one end, and you'll get it through much easier than trying to do it with anything else. It's just easier to use a big yardstick and do it that way. And then if you're turning things, I have a turning loop and it's great, but I prefer this. It is a wooden chopstick, just from any takeaway, and it works so well. It's got a little flat cornered edge. I use it all the time. I'm always spruiking it in my videos. I don't sell them. Everyone else does. They're not even sold. They just come with your takeaway. You probably have some in your drawer, and they're a great little thing to have in your sewing kit. Really useful. Before everything goes ahead, that this collar matches up. So I'm just running it around that center front opening and make sure that once it's all done, it's gonna fit. The main thing is that it is long enough. If it's too short, then you have to make adjustments. And if it's too long, you have to make adjustments. All about that hem, and you can obviously dip the hem from the inside just to make it a little longer at the front if you do have a bit of a discrepancy. But if you've measured correctly, it should all turn out quite well. So it's just about that double checking. Now, if you do it the way the pattern says, you can cut it to those measurements. But of course, if you're changing this even by a centimeter on the hem, or just making it a little bit longer or shorter or way longer, you're gonna have to change the length of your collar. But it's as easy as that. It is one measurement round. You double it and add a seam allowance at each end. So simple. That's why it's such an easy jacket to make. Once I've pinned the jacket in place, and I've pinned it meticulously so I know that it fits, I then come through and put in the loops, and I've got them at 11 centimeters, so over about 10.5 inches up from the hem. Now that's so it sits right at the empire line. You might want to have it lower so it sits more around the waist, but this is what I did just for my own personal reasons, aesthetic reasons. I love things that hit the empire line. You can change that, and of course if you've got a longer or shorter jacket, you might want to change it. And you might not have loops at all. You might have something completely different, but this is how you put loops in. And so you just pin them in, and then everything goes under the machine at once. And the best way to attach your collar and everything is to start at the center back neck, work down one side, then come back to the center back neck and work down the other. That way, if your fabric gets pushed as you sew, it only gets pushed a little bit. If you start at one hem and go all the way around to the other hem, the amount of pushing can really push the end of the collar out, and you can have a real mismatch down at the hem. So just by starting at the center back, you can mitigate that. And also if you make a mistake, you've only done halfway. So you've only got half of it to fix if you have to unpick and do it again. The sleeves are simple. Place them, mark them. The measurements for marking them are in there, and sew a straight seam. Do some really good back tacking. My machine does it itself, so I don't need to worry about that as much. Do some great back tacking, and then you just sew the straight line, and this is where the simplicity really comes in. Once you've done the collar, the rest just falls into place. I always say this about making kimonos: it takes as long to attach the collar as it does to make the entire garment. So spend your time on the collar, don't rush, no one's rushing you, take your time, and then enjoy how easy it is to finish the rest of the garment. Same with the side seams. Match them up, whip them up to the Miyatsu Gucci, so that little underarm opening, and do some good back stitching there as well, because that is a high use area, or a high work area. It works hard, that part, to stay together. So when I'm closing my sleeves, in this case I'm doing the French seam. So we put wrong sides together. Make sure you have your wrong sides together to start with. It's the opposite of what you think you should be doing. It's a mistake I make quite often, and I put right sides together. You're on muscle memory, you just work away and you whiz it under the machine and realize you've done it backwards. Rolling sides together, and you can then clip away all the sort of fly. Look at all the flies and hairs and things that I've got on this one. They can be a bit daunting, a French seam, but that's of course if you're doing a proper French seam in the lingerie method, the French way. So you have to have 2 millimeters in the first seam, and then you're doing 3 to 5 millimeters in the second one. They don't have to be like that. Of course, this is a really secure seam, and it's actually quite easy if you give yourself more room. So I've gone for 1.5 centimeters, which is nearly half an inch, on the second run, and I did about 1 centimeter, half an inch on the first one, but then trimmed that back. So there's lots of room to move. The key is trimming. You have to trim that bit because the flyaways will come through the second pass. And the other key is pressing. Press at every stage. You press it into place, then you sew and you trim. You press that into its next stage, and then you sew, and then you press it again. The more you press, the better your clothes will look. After you've done that, it's about fixing up the edges of the sleeves, I call them. So you've got a back edge that sits against the jacket and the cuff. So with this is really easy to sew material. It's a viscose poly thing. It's a brocade. It sort of does what you tell it to. It's very slippery, but when you've got it in place, it will do what it says. So I double turn the cuff and just whip through there. And then at the back, you've got a press to follow, because you pressed open that sleeve seam when you attach it to the body. So that will just fold back into place, and then you just whip round the outer edge of the sleeve, and that then folds in, and it's absolutely beautiful with that silver line on the inside of that black sleeve. Just gorgeous. And there she is. Isn't that beautiful? You see the bow sitting just here, just at the empire line below the chest. And if I lift up the side, I'll show you how this is tied. So you see it's tied to the body. So the sash ties to the body, which means when you turn around, it lets the back of the garment fall out in that mid-century style, giving you the shape at the back still, rather than pulling it in and creasing it. Of course, you can just wrap the sash around the body as you would any belt on a robe, but this gives this freedom while still cinching it to the empire line at the front, which really gives a good silhouette on almost all body types, because this is usually the smallest part of the body, and why you want to accentuate that. And also, when you look at the bow, just sitting there, nice and neat, like a rose, like a flower in bloom, like one of these sakura, with its petals coming out, the bow making the petals. Absolutely wonderful. So you can see here, if you've seen the other video where I've made this out of cotton, you'll remember how structured it was. And that was just a plain cotton. It was a lovely cotton, but it was still a plain cotton. This is a viscose satin brocade. So it's thick. You can see on the inside. You've seen it throughout the whole video. So it's almost reversible. But it's also extremely drapey, because it's a viscose. I'd say there's a little bit of polyester in there as well, and so it just folds down. But imagine this just above a black dress. If you got that black, or a lovely grey dress matching something out of this sakura pattern, or something like a magenta, just sitting above it, and you put something matte underneath, and then this is just a shining cherry blossom on top, which is rather fitting. Oh, it's so beautiful. It really is. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you make one yourself. You can go and buy my pattern. That's available. There's links in the description below to go and get the pattern, and you can make this and make those adjustments. You saw how easy it is to change the pattern and make it fit what you want to make. So this is much it's not much longer, it's a little bit longer than the one in black cotton. But isn't it wonderful?